Woodstock's Journal, March 9th, 2017. My power went out earlier today. It's back on now, but I had to write my review from the library. The city's afraid of me. I've seen its true. Oh God, how did you do it, Jackie? How the hell did you do it? It's the year 1987, and a government contractor named Edward Blake has been murdered in his own home in New York City. A vigilante, known only by the alias Rorschach, is investigating this event restlessly. Former crime-fighting partners Dan Dryberg, or formerly known as Night Owl, Laurie Jupiter, formerly known as the Silk Spectre, Adrian Veidt, formerly known as Ozymandias, and John Osterman, also known as Dr. Manhattan, show little to no interest in the whole matter. Blake was a crime fighter in his younger days, as it seems, but he apparently was not the best one ever. Seeing as how Blake did serve his country, a military funeral is held in his honor. We see one of the men attending it is an ex-supervillain named Moloch. Rorschach's curiosity is piqued, so he squeezes Moloch for info. Moloch tells him that before he died, Blake had visited him in costume as his hero alter ego, the comedian. Blake was drunk and voicing his sorrows to Moloch, rambling about how he's done some pretty awful things in his life. But what he was about to do was something even worse than all that. Meanwhile, Adrian and John are working on a project together to provide the world with an alternative energy source based on John's superpowers. This causes distance to form between him and Laurie, his girlfriend. Laurie eventually leaves John, feeling that his perception of reality, thanks to his abilities, has left him unable to fully understand her, or even people in general. She walks out and shacks up with Dan. After being accused of giving both his ex-girlfriend and a former close friend cancer, John decides he's fed up with humanity and leaves Earth behind in favor of the unpopulated Mars. After further investigations and suspicions raised by John's disappearance, Rorschach returns to Moloch for more info, but finds out that he was murdered before he arrived, with the cops ready to arrest him. The vigilante attempts to escape, but is eventually arrested and sent to prison. Making thrills again, Dan and Laurie resume their superhero activities and bust out Rorschach. They all return to Dan's apartment to continue Rorschach's investigation, and Dan deciding something had to be going on, seeing as how Laurie and John had been together for years, and Laurie was perfectly healthy. However, John himself arrives after foreseeing a conversation between himself and Laurie on Mars. Assuming said conversation entailed her convincing John to come back to Earth, she comes with him to Mars, where they have a discussion about the importance of humanity and life in general. John is at first unmoved by Laurie's arguments, however, until, through the use of his abilities, they discover together that Laurie's father was in fact Edward Blake, a fact which disgusts Laurie immensely because Blake had attempted to rape her mother, Sally, back in the 40s, when they were on the original Watchmen team, the Minutemen. This also astounds John to the point that it reinvigorates his appreciation for life and humanity, leading him to want to come back to Earth. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dan and Rorschach decide to investigate Adrian, realizing that something isn't quite right with the guy. And to their shock, they find that Adrian is behind Blake's murder. The two of them travel to Antarctica to confront Adrian, but Adrian already knows they're coming. Adrian explains that he exposed John's ex to the lethal radiation that made her sick, and murdered Blake because he told him about a plan he'd concocted to avoid all-out nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union. That plan being, destroy a select number of cities across the globe: New York, Hong Kong, Moscow, Mexico City, Havana, London, Paris, LA, and do all of this with a nuclear weapon based on Dr. Manhattan's energy signature, thus blaming a third party for a shared tragedy among democratic and communist societies, allowing them to unite against a common enemy and therefore averting nuclear holocaust, killing millions to save billions. Rorschach and Dan are incensed by this, and when John and Laurie arrive, they're none too pleased either. They all attempt to fight, but Adrian stops them all by simply showing them the newsreels from every country on Earth with access to television, allowing all of them to realize that his plan is already working. Dan and Laurie aren't sure what to think of all of this, but eventually decide to stay silent. John can't say he agrees with Adrian's actions, but he admits that he understands his mentality and tells Laurie that he's going to move away to another galaxy. Rorschach, however, doesn't give a damn if it's world peace. It's unjust and the truth needs to be told. Before either can leave, though, John murders Rorschach to stop him from telling the world their secret. But unbeknownst to all, Rorschach had been recording all that had happened before they had left for Antarctica in his personal journal, which he delivered to a Republican newspaper called The New Frontiersman. Pros. Jackie Earle Haley's performance as Rorschach. The character is a nutjob, no two ways about it. But Jackie does a great job of giving us an insight into the nutjob. When he says,
"Never compromise. Not even in the face of Armageddon."
You buy it completely thanks to his gravel voice delivery. He also does a good job of conveying Rorschach's deadpan sense of humor. While in prison, there's a gangster little person who calls himself Big Figure, who has a grudge against Rorschach. He eventually breaks into his cell and tries to sick one of his goons on the guy, but Rorschach disposes of him by sidestepping him into his toilet. Rorschach then remarks,
"Never disposed of sewage with a toilet before. Obvious, really."
And while for the majority of the film, Jackie's face is covered with a mask, when he gets to use his face for a moment, he uses the hell out of it. When the cops dogpile him and pull off his mask, Rorschach is screaming bloody murder about how they're taking away his real face. And the way Jackie plays the scene, you legitimately believe that this guy thinks that the mask is his actual face. And special kudos to two particular moments. A scene where he admits to Dan that he is kind of a jerk and genuinely does value his friendship. This is noteworthy because he always refers to Dan as Daniel. He doesn't ever refer to him by his superhero name, just Daniel. And also his moment in Ozymandias' flashback. He's still doing the gravelly voice, but it's a little softer than it is in present day.
Justice matters. Janie Slater, Manhattan's old girlfriend.
That could just be because he's younger, or it could be because he was honestly more well-adjusted back then compared to today. Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan. Special praise must obviously go to the SFX artists on this film for making Billy's LED light suit actually look like a glowing blue Greek god physique. But that's still Billy's face and Billy's voice. And Billy's face and voice are doing an excellent job conveying both the emotion of Manhattan as well as his distinct lack of emotion. It's extremely subtle and pretty easy to miss, but the way Billy plays certain scenes, you can see what's going on through the good doctor's head. No, not that doctor. No, not that doctor either. No, not that doctor either. Yes, that doctor. Yes. When he and Laurie first return to Earth, the tone of voice Billy uses perfectly conveys the cold rage he's feeling toward Adrian as he realizes the son of a bitch just framed him for a global catastrophe. The deep breath he takes when Laurie acknowledges that yes, she has been sleeping with Dan since she left John also perfectly conveys his frustration about the situation. There are obviously far less subtle instances of emotion, like the scene where John's ex confronts him about giving her cancer. He's tripping over his words, trying to explain that he didn't mean to hurt her, and they didn't know what would happen to her. He's desperate to try and explain how sorry he is and how much he really does care. And while the reporters surround him and try to ask him about the whole cancer thing, it's pretty easy to guess what emotion he's feeling when he's yelling,
Are you kidding? I said, leave me alone!
It's hunger. I mean, we've all been a crotchety little jerk when we haven't eaten for a few hours. There's really not much to Dan as a character in my observation, but I do think Patrick Wilson does a good job in the role. He does a good job of playing the shy, everyday, schlubby kind of guy, while also portraying the reasonable authority figure to everyone else's, well, a lot less than reasonable authority figure. He also has good chemistry with Jackie as longtime partners who have a close relationship. And same with his early scene with Matthew Good as Adrian. You can tell these guys are BFFs who just love the heck out of each other. It's actually really sweet. Speaking of Matthew, kudos to him as well. One touch I especially like is his accent. Matthew Good is an Englishman in real life and plays the scenes of him talking to reporters and scientists with a flawless American accent. When he's talking to his friends, though, he talks with a kind of light German accent. And this makes sense because, according to Matthew, Adrian's parents were frickin' Nazis. He speaks with an American accent so nobody will know about his history, but when he's around the Watchmen, he just talks with his real accent because he can be himself. He doesn't have to hide for fear of judgment. He knows that no one's judging him about his parents. They don't see him as a piece of crap Nazi, they just see him as good old Ozymandias. And he does a good job of playing the self-loathing aspect of Adrian after the climax. He does a good job of conveying the fact that I'm not proud of what I did, but I would do it again. And he knows he just did something horrible. He's not going to make apologies for it, because he knows no one would forgive him. And he knows that he doesn't deserve forgiveness, but he's not going to act like he wants it either. Malin Ackerman does a good job as Laurie. I can't exactly say she's my favorite character in the film, but I do like how she plays the inherent frustration of being a normal woman who's dating the blasted Superman. Like, do you see me? Do you see a mass of particles in a particular shape? Do you even care if there's a difference? Do you even care about me? She really gets at the inherent frustration of not knowing what's going through your partner's head. Especially when your partner isn't even human anymore. And kudos to Laurie for being the only character smart enough to just shoot Adrian. Everyone's trying to come at the guy who used to joke that he was fast enough to catch a bullet with brawn. Well, Laurie just opts to put him to the test. Nice going, Jupiter. Jeffrey Dean Morgan nails it as Edward Blake. The guy has that uber-masculine swagger you'd want for a character like Blake. He also does a good job of showing why that attitude can be pretty dangerous. The fact that I find Blake so deplorable because A, he tried to rape a woman, B, he shot a woman who was pregnant with his kid, C, he killed Kennedy, D, he fired at protesters just because one of them threw a frickin' can at him. I mean, the bullets were rubber, but still, is a major compliment to Morgan, whose mischievous smile is just so damn punchable. And yet, while Blake is a terrible person, no doubt, you really believe his emotional breakdown when he tells Moloch what's going on with Adrian. He'd always rationalize what he was doing in the past, but all of this is just something he can't abide. He can't abide the senseless murder of millions of people, no matter what Adrian's logic is. Carlo Gugino, 300 alumni Stephen McCaddy, and Dawn of the Dead alumni Matt Brewer play the original Silk Spectre, Laurie's mother, Sally Jupiter, the original Night Owl, Dan's mentor Hollis Mason, and Moloch, a retired supervillain Blake had a notorious rivalry with, respectively. And they all do a good job. Carl and Stephen play these retired heroes who have a sense of nostalgia about those glory days of being crime fighters, regardless of how good those good old days probably weren't. And Matt plays a pretty brow-beaten, broken character, which makes sense if you kept getting your balls busted by Blake for 30-odd years, Then life goes and gives you cancer to boot. Tough luck. The action is a mixed bag for me personally, but I do love the sequence when Rorschach tries to escape from the cops when Adrian frames him for murdering Moloch. Rorschach nearly manages to evade the entire SWAT team on just pure cunning, tools, and sheer force of will. And the action is never cluttered or boring. In fact, despite complaints that I will address later on, I'd say that's the case for all these fights. They're not hard to follow, and they definitely do a good job of holding on to your attention. I'm not as jazzed about Snyder's use of popular music in this film as I was in Dawn of the Dead, but I still do like some of the songs he uses here. My personal favorite is the montage after the comedian is murdered that is set to Bob Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changin'. I actually first heard this song in the theaters when I saw this movie back in '09, and it's a really great song. And the song's sentiment is used perfectly to show the passage of time from the 40s with the Minutemen to the 50s when those heroes were starting to hit hard times, to the 60s when those heroes had left behind the life and the new heroes were coming up, to the 70s when the Watchmen were formed, and then back to the 80s when all the heroes are outlawed. There's even a couple Easter eggs in there for history nerds and comic nerds alike. Like the two rich people standing by when Hollis Mason punches out that gunman. Those people are supposed to be Thomas and Martha Wayne. And on the history end, we of course have Blake being the one who shot Kennedy, and a little more obscure one. And while on the moon, Neil Armstrong is heard saying, a reference to an old wives' tale about Neil's childhood neighbor. Tyler Bates' score is fantastic, and we will talk about it. But first, I'd like to pay special compliment to a theme from a composer named Philip Glass for a movie called whatever the heck that says. It's used during John's recounting of his transformation into Dr. Manhattan. It has this cold melody that sounds sort of like a mentally disturbed merry-go-round. And that ends with this strong but not overstated din 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 din. The score finally stops for a moment when John's ex-girlfriend, Janie, throws a pair of earrings he gave to her at him. John freezes them before they can hit him. And then it picks back up with that din 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 din, with the slight hint of a sad piano melody when John says,
I am tired of Earth. These people. I'm tired of being caught in the tangle of their lives.
It's absolutely beautiful. Now let's chat about Tyler's own work. This creepy little number plays when Rorschach finds the child killer's house, and this plays when John thinks he gave his ex-girlfriend cancer. Need to say more? Speaking of music, I really like the use of silence in certain parts of this movie. The absolute standout being the moment where Rorschach confronts the bastard who kidnapped and murdered that little girl. Aside from Rorschach's ominous snickering and the killer shouting that he didn't do it and then pleading with Rorschach to just arrest him already, the scene is dead quiet, and it makes it so freaking intense. You're on the edge of the seat by the time Rorschach finally drives that meat cleaver into the son of a bitch's head. I really do love Rorschach's last scene, when he begs for John to just kill him already. And what I love about it is the ambiguity of Rorschach's motivation. Does he want to die because he secretly agrees with Adrian, but can't compromise what is so clearly unjust with his worldview? Or does he just know that he doesn't have a chance of somehow overcoming freaking Dr. Manhattan, so he doesn't want to waste time begging for mercy or hearing how sorry John is that it has to come to this? Or is he sacrificing himself so that Adrian will assume that all the loose ends are tied up and won't see it coming when the New Frontiersman publishes his journal? Cons.
Things are tough all over, Cupcake. It rains on the just and the unjust alike. The comedian has a little bit of both.
No. No, he wasn't. He was like 99.99999% unjust. And come to think of it, why did Sally sleep with Blake? That's something you can just mention and then not explain beyond, I made a mistake. I mean, okay, but why did you make that mistake? Why did you willingly go to a man who tried to rape you 20 years ago? And on that note, how come Hollis and Sally didn't warn anyone about Blake? If there was any superhero veteran you should not approach to join your group, it was the comedian, if for no other reason than he himself was a criminal for sexually assaulting a woman, and probably worse. If Blake really wanted to come out with Adrian's plan, why not alert the media? Or tell John? Or go and tell Tricky Dick himself? Why go to some lowly schmuck who hates your ass? Dan and Laurie's sex scene is a dead weight on the movie. At least with the sex scene between Gorgo and Leonidas in 300. You could argue it was set up to contrast with the scene of Theron extorting Gorgo for sex in exchange for speaking on Leonidas' behalf. This, though, not only is it awkward as hell, it doesn't contribute to the story in any way. What is the point in it? Can someone tell me if this exists for any reason beyond, oh, they had that scene in the graphic novel? Anyone? The violence in this movie is too extreme for my taste. I was fine with the level of blood in Dawn of the Dead in 300, but this is just excessive. And it also undermines the story. If Rorschach is supposed to be the insane, uber-violent vigilante, and Dan and Laurie are supposed to be the well-adjusted ones, why is it that Dan and Laurie get the scene where they leave a bunch of gangbangers as a bloody mess? Rorschach just gets a scene calling the scared look in a mugger's eyes, quote-unquote, rewarding. I don't care if he managed to win Vietnam. I highly doubt that Nixon could push for Congress to re-allow for the president to serve more than 2 terms and then wind up being re-elected 5 times in a row at least. I mean, if you have to enlist the aid of a supernatural power to win a war, you haven't exactly been doing a good job before that. You'll likely guarantee you'll see the end of your term proper, but that's it. The way Adrian knocks off the comedian makes no sense. Why throw him out of a window? That's gonna alert as many people as possible. Why not just poison him or have someone shoot him on the street? Why the most public form of execution you could feasibly come up with? Seriously, the beat cop detectives are looking over this crap already and thinking it's fishy. If real cops are thinking this looks weird, then what's a nut like Rorschach gonna think? I don't understand the civil unrest about superheroes. I mean, I'd say in the event of something like a police strike, superheroes would be an ideal alternative. If the real cops don't want to do their job, then let some trained citizens do it for them. Preferably citizens more well-adjusted than Rorschach, or with a stronger sense of right and wrong than Blake, but still. Okay, folks. I'm gonna be honest with you here. I don't like this movie. But, and there is a very large but here, I respect this movie. This isn't the first superhero movie to treat superheroes seriously. I mean, hell, The Dark Knight dropped literally the year before, and the first two X-Men films had been around for 9 and 6 years, respectively. And it wasn't the first R-rated comic book film. We already had The Punisher Warzone the year before, 300 in 07, V for Vendetta in 06, A History of Violence in 05, Thomas Jane's Punisher in 04, Road to Perdition in 02, then we had Blade in 98, Spawn in 97, and The Crow all the way back in 1994. But this movie did something no other superhero movie had done before it. It took the tropes of the superhero genre and deconstructed them. No, The Incredibles, while fantastic, does not really deconstruct the superhero genre. If anything, it's a loving reconstruction of the genre before anyone had even bothered to deconstruct it. Snyder takes the tropes of characters like Batman, Superman, or even Wolverine, and shows us all what they'd probably be like in real life. If someone like Bruce Wayne, with his limitless resources and wealth, really wanted to, what could keep him from creating a doomsday device just to force the world into coexisting peacefully with itself? If someone who spends his nights regularly beating the snot out of crooks for whatever wrongdoing there is, chances are they'd see something that was just too awful to maintain a healthy worldview, without any kind of emotional support or legal procedures to hold them back. They'd likely just devolve into some kind of paranoid mad dog who was always looking for connections where none existed, always looking for problems where none existed. If someone who always kept a take no prisoners, Danna Torpedoes, I go where I want to go kind of attitude really was allowed a position to take the law into their own hands, chances are they wouldn't always take the most noble action, shall we say. If someone with so much power that they could be considered a literal god made flesh truly existed, they might eventually lose their grip on reality somehow. They might not become something akin to Superman in the Injustice game, but they wouldn't exactly become someone who can 100% get human beings. And while all people react differently to all things, there are enough people who would react this way that you can acknowledge that there would be people like Adrian, like Blake, like Rorschach, or like John. So with that all out of the way, I'm going to give Watchmen 2 scores. On a scale of my own personal enjoyment, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. But on a scale of my appreciation for the film as an artistic achievement, I honor it with a 3.5 out of 5. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. And if you did, then like this video, comment if you want to, or maybe press that subscribe button. Or if you want to explain why I'm a horrible person for praising Snyder's butchering of Alan Moore's masterpiece, shoot me an email at idgaf@whatyouthink.com. Or, if you want to tell me what a silly reviewer I am for not properly recognizing the glory of the greatest comic book movie of all time, talk to me in the comments, because I actually want to have a conversation with you. And when that's all done, come back later for my review of Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. Take care, everyone. Woodstock out.